Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
Well, hello, this is Chris Parker, and we're back with Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. And today, coming in from South Africa, is Eli Goldstein. And Eli and I have known each other for quite a few years. Back in the day, part of the Global CX panel, which still exists, which is a panel of thinkers and doers around customer experience, strategy, and design. Eli, would you introduce yourself, please, to the audience? And, so who is Eli? What do you do? And why do you do what you do?
Well, I don't think we have too much time for me to go into too much detail.
Yeah.
But anyway, my background, strangely enough, is one in agriculture and in farming for a few years. I actually picked up a lot of experience in a whole lot of areas which, strangely enough, are becoming very interesting in terms of today's world. That is within farming, one has the ability to see the value chain very easily. And you can go from the production all the way through to when the food hits the table. And the same then was very useful when I joined IBM in terms of working in various industries, which then led me to this whole idea of the customer, as it were, and the customer being the person who really puts the food on everybody's table, if I can put it very simply. Mm-hmm. What is interesting, I found, was that unfortunately, customers, in terms of being treated well, has been something which is a bit of an enigma in many countries, which is why I got involved probably some 8 to 9 years ago in customer experience, and that's how Chris and I met. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that with this whole COVID-19 scenario at the moment, that the ability to focus on the customer is becoming more important than ever. And I think that if I can say that what drives me very much is this idea that customers need to be treated very well, and that unfortunately I find that there is so much clutter in terms of information around what customer experience is, mm-hmm. that what really got to me, and in fact it was before Chris pointed me to what he is doing, before you pointed me to the canvas, I actually did some work on the strategy canvas a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And I find that the ability to look at a business from the point of view of, let's call it a helicopter view, as opposed to trying to sift through the various silos that exist in a business and not having communication between people in the business, and not being able to understand that every single person in that business is in fact someone who is responsible for that customer satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And that has really become, I think, a passion with me. So I would say that's probably what drives me.
Beautiful. And something that seems so obvious to you and I, why do you think this customer centricity or customer service or customer orientation is such an enigma? Well, how is this not top of mind for everyone, do you think?
Well, it's very strange. I think, that I think for many, many years, companies have been driven by striving for profits. Looking after the interests of shareholders, mm-hmm. and in many cases ignoring what was really the bottom line in terms of getting enough value into the company. And I think that the ability, unfortunately, what has happened with a lot of large enterprises is that they have lost the plot in terms of understanding that if you're in a management or leadership capacity, you cannot just abrogate responsibility to different parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you've got someone who is taking care of the customer, it doesn't end there. It actually has to permeate right through the organization.
Oh, you mean
And this is
the customer service department isn't the only group that needs to be responsible for the customer?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, this is where it all falls over. And this is where, unfortunately, when we put the sort of Band-Aid or the plaster of a so-called contact center or call center in order to get rid of all the problems
Mm-hmm.
we ostensibly have with customers, is that it's all very well and good if they get it right. But unfortunately, once it leaves the contact center, it falls into some black hole.
Yeah.
And that has been something which has been the bane of my life, I think.
And
To try and find a way of getting people to work together.
And that I would imagine is the spirit or the drive behind Customerline, which is your own company. Can you share a little bit about what value you create through your company? So.
Well, I think what we try and do is to make people understand that unfortunately, if you don't have total commitment right across the company, and it actually is not embedded, as it were, in the culture of the organization, that you really are not going to get excellence within the customer experience space. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is that we try to align the business towards the customer as opposed to the other way around. So very much, I know this is a hackneyed term, an outside-in approach, mm-hmm. as opposed to an inside-out approach. And everything is really driven in terms of what the customer needs. And as we know, in many cases, legacy computer systems, information systems, etc., become almost an albatross in terms of the company being able to perform with regard to the customer. Yeah. Whereas if they had started from the outside, from what the customer really needs, and then design or fashion the business in that way, is actually very important. And interestingly enough, the canvas, including the one that you're working with, does show that. It's taking you back and saying, hang on, what is it that you're really doing here in terms of customers? Mm. And how do you put that together, looking at the top down? And I think that ability to, in a way, simplify something which any business, as we know, is extremely complex, to be able to simplify that to a way that everyone in the organization understands what it is you're really doing, almost takes me back to this farm thing, where you can see from the time you plant the seed until you harvest and the distribution, etc. It's the same concept, basically, that value chain. And it's really this whole idea, of the organization being this organism that has to work, its neural system, as it were, has to work together in order for the company to succeed.
Yeah, I love it. I think you have to look at an organization in different ways, through different lenses, if you will, and also at different times, because it is very much a living thing. And then also you can use something like the simplicity scan, the simplicity canvas that you've used that I've made. But I think it's almost any lens that you can put up, any canvas or any framework, and take a moment to discover your organization through that, realizing that it is limited because we're limited by language and we're limited by time. And then what you discover, of course, determine what to ignore and then what to actually adopt. Because those, organizations change and there's legacy. In your background, you've shared a bit about, your agricultural background, but you also have a technology background. I think you have, sometimes I think you've even been a CIO, one or two times, I think, but
yes.
Like me, I think you come in on how does technology help or hinder the customer experience? Can you share a little bit about that?
I think it certainly does. I think we certainly have to be very careful that we don't make the mistake that we see technology as a silver bullet. So if one is looking at digitalizing, whichever way you want to call it, a company, it's not just a question of putting up an app or putting out systems over there that the customer can actually get through to you on. In fact, if you're talking about proper digital transformation, then it's very much around the customer. It's very much starting at the point of which saying, what is the customer need and how do we build it, going again from outside inwards. And I think some of the biggest challenges that one has is that, again, talking about how leadership tends to not even delegate, but abrogate the responsibility to the IT department. The IT department doesn't talk the language of the business and vice versa. And unfortunately, that communication has been the cause of many failures in terms of whether it be customer relationship management or whatever technology innovation one tries to bring in to a business. And I think what was quite interesting is I did some work back in a number of years back with a chap by the name of Robin Lawton. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's an American guy living I think he's in Florida. And he's written, very early on, he wrote a book on customer-centered culture and recently brought out another book called Mastering Excellence. And I think it's quite interesting in terms of the way he looks at how one really uses communication, uses language within an organization to make sure that we can communicate and people understand each other. And that comes back to the issue of technology. Is technology benefiting or not?
Well,
so yes, one could go into a lot about that, but I don't think we'll.
No, well, one of the reasons for my laughing is actually the ebullient, the coaching brand that I have launched during this crazy Corona COVID time. The pineapple logo is very much inspired by that story, because as a head of IT, or it's called head of change and innovation for a division of a bank, my people were proposing technologies, upgrades, and investments that carried risk, that would change the shape of the landscape of the business. And the language they were using, as I was listening to them, was unintelligible to the CFO and the commercial people. And what I used as an example during that time, and I got it as a meme somewhere online somewhere, but it was the statement of, "Trust me, I have a pineapple." And because I said, "Oh, guys, that you're asking for a couple 100,000 or more to upgrade SAP to HANA for in-memory processing." So guys, they do not care about your pineapple. What is it going to do? What is it going to do for the customer? Or the top line or the bottom line? And so that sort of just stuck, and then it carried forward. And there's the pineapple and the ebullient logo. So it was I have to laugh. It is for those technical people listening to this, which is probably half of my community. Before you, and I'm curious if you have any advice on this, also Eli, before you try to convince or pitch or do anything about tech, really take a moment to have a conversation with the person, either the customer or the executive, and just ask them the question, what are you trying to achieve? And not only listen to what their answer is, but listen to how they describe it. Well, I'm trying to, increase NPS by X or Y, or, okay, well then maybe you should orient on why NPS, Net Promoter Scores, is important for them or not. But how do you help organizations get on that same awareness of outside in and get on the same language and how to make, more purposeful investments?
Yeah, it's, I think very much, just to add to what you were saying, I have a book on my bookshelf called Think Like Your Customer by a chap called Bill Stinnett. You may know who it is, probably read it. And I think that he aimed it at salespeople in terms of how they would sell to the C-suite. But I think it's very much applicable to say one within the company that is trying to get a message across. And at the end of the day, you really have to say, it's effectively, where are you at the moment and where do you want to be and how do we get there? Mm-hmm. And it's in some ways, it's as simple as that. Unfortunately, the how we get there is not always that simple.
No.
But it's very much a question of plotting that out and having some kind of idea of what the steps are to where you want to get to. And I think it's very unfortunate that what COVID has done is it's actually escalated. I recently wrote an article about this change agent, the unseen global change agent, that has moved things from being at a certain point to where they are today. And you would think that, people that never wanted to touch technology all of a sudden are using it online. We're not talking about, millennials. We're talking about people of my age and older that are actually in doing things, banking online and email, Zoom calls.
I've seen some funny little memes and graphics and say, okay, well, who is the most responsible for this digital transformation acceleration? The CIO, the CTO, the CDO, or COVID? Yeah. And then,
right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The problem, however, is, that while that's great, and I mean, you are now saying, well, we've kind of pushed you into the situation, your fight and flight reflexes made you become more digitally literate, if you wish.
Well,
what we haven't looked at is what's behind that, cybersecurity, et cetera, and in, are we? There are all sorts of issues around that, and I think that if you recall the chap who spoke at one of those sessions at the beginning, Herman Singh, when he spoke about the fact that ultimately there was 10 years of planning, as it were, from the technology department, but did they tell the C-suite about it? I don't think so.
No, probably not. Yeah, well, I think that the counterbalance of this, COVID being the accelerator of digital transformation, you also kind of have to ask yourself, well, how much of the previous transformation was actually unnecessary? On one hand, but then on the other hand, a lot of these technical teams have been preparing for this. I have a friend of mine who's the CIO for an adult education, national in the Netherlands adult education company, and he shared with me that they had it all purchased, and it was the 40 plus instructors who just didn't see the value of it. And once COVID happened, those people just rushed in for the training, and they were able to pretty much overnight, or basically within a week, move all of their adult classes online. And because the burning platform showed up, and then they were in the right place at the right time. So you mentioned those sessions, and so I'd love it if you spend some time about, just tell the audience about those sessions, what those sessions were and why you arranged those, and how wonderful they were.
So I think it was just slightly before, maybe just when the lockdown started with COVID in South Africa. Helen Pence and I actually sat down, and we had been thinking of doing some, it was actually some seminars, physical seminars, because we spoke at a conference in February, at the same conference which she chaired. And we said, well, maybe we need to run a couple of, these sessions, but we weren't even thinking of doing it remotely. And of course, then when this COVID happened, we decided, well, what about this idea of saying, here we have a situation where there's a sudden crisis, and why don't we take the crisis as a case study in terms of saying how you can change business very quickly in an agile manner, and what would you do in order to live with that, and how would you go forward from there? So that was the basic premise on which we held this. And I think that reaching out to 11 or 12 people, including yourself, and the response we got was quite incredible. I mean, there was just absolutely no argument. Everybody got on board very quickly. But what was amazing, I think, is that we managed to pull this all together, literally, in a matter of a few weeks.
Yeah.
I think, obviously the marketing didn't have the same run-up that one would have normally, but somehow it fell together. And I think that was also an example of how one can really do something if you have to.
Yeah, it was incredible. And thank you again for the invitation, because I presented, but I also chose to join, I think, all of the sessions, because it was a series of 5 sessions in the evening for me. And you had a couple experts speaking, facilitated by yourself and Helen. And then the participants, and there was like 5 or 6 teams of business people and entrepreneurs, and just a really interesting, diverse group of people. And then they were able to interact and ask questions. And then they had some homework in between and report back. For me, it was really interesting and educational and inspiring just to be the fly on the wall and participate in that. So it was, and I understood from Helen and yourself that you're going to run more of these things, I hope. Is that?
Yes, yes, we are planning to do that. And I think that given the time we had, in that short time, the outcome was good. I think it was generally good. And I think that in a way was a little bit of a laboratory test, if you wish, in terms of seeing how it would work. So with a number of tweaks, we are certainly planning to hold more of those.
Okay. And how can people find that event?
Well, we have a website which will be updated with as soon as the new events start coming on. It's Symbiosis, which is spelled very differently from the normal spelling.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes for people so they can see the link there. Yeah.
Symbiosis.com. And also we are putting up a LinkedIn group, as well as, some other social media links, etc. Nice.
And I'm curious if we loop back to your business, because and I'm just literally curious about this. It felt like that mixed mastermind group was really more about giving from you and the guests and the participants, as opposed to capturing deals and values and leads. How did that event contribute to, I don't know, your business growth, or was there a commercial aspect to that?
I think it was more of a potential spin-off from that rather than an actual, we sort of hope that there may well flow business towards any of the panelists, which we didn't have a problem with.
Yeah.
But I think, the sharing, what is interesting to me is the ability to get people together. And I've always been a proponent of collaboration. And I think that certainly in an entrepreneurial world, one needs to collaborate. You just have to. You have to be able to turn to people, whether it be for coaching, mentoring, whether it be for, involving them in projects or whatever the case may be. I think it's very important, because that way you can then compete with large enterprises by having a group of people who work together on a particular project or a program, but at the same time not have the overhead of having all of those people as part of your headcount, and it's pushing up the cost to the customer.
Yeah.
So I think these kind of think tanks, or we actually want to call it an ecosystem of critical thinkers, or something to that effect, which we're busy working on. I think the whole idea here is to benefit the individual entrepreneur, but at the same time, that 2 plus 2 should equal 7 and not 4, so that you basically get that multiplier effect.
I'm really interested to see how it evolves, because I think it was a solid experiment. Some really good people involved. Some meaningful insights came out of it, and I also loved it that you and Helen were just organizing like-minded critical thinkers. I think mostly just to help each other during this crazy time, and realized, I think, that the benefits, for your business or my business would come later. So I just really appreciated the culture and the mindset and the style on that. So thank you again for the invitation, and I will put the show notes in there. We've just got a couple minutes left. I'm curious if maybe 2 more questions, but one of them is about momentum and keeping things going. And so, you work now at a distance, not able to see your customers every day, maybe like you used to. How do you stay positive? How do you keep your mindset in the right place and keep growing your business during this insane time we live in?
Well, I think one of my other hobbies is research.
Okay.
And I think that certainly that keeps me very much involved. But at the same time, I think it's important to every now and again, make contact, even if it's at a personal level, with your customers, which I try and do as far as I can. Everybody being, although we're all in lockdown, I think everybody's very busy, so you've got to find that gap. But I think, people really appreciate even if you just call them for 5 or 10 minutes, how are you doing, or an email.
Yeah.
So I think that's extremely important in these times. And, I think even just feeding them information that may be of benefit to them, just sending them links to read, et cetera, in terms of, which is where the research comes in as well.
Well, I'm not sure what you're seeing in South Africa, but what I'm certainly seeing here in Europe is WhatsApp groups, really theme or topic-based WhatsApp groups. Maybe there's too many of them, in fact, on my phone. But what I'm seeing there is that is almost sort of just a constant stream of. Today, it's been overwhelmed by happy birthdays by a lady I collaborate with quite frequently. And but oftentimes there's also links to interesting stuff, positive stories, white papers flying around. Are you seeing WhatsApp going, in South Africa as a?
Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, I'm part of a WhatsApp group. It's called CX Community of Practice. It's flooded with messages all the time. But the most interesting message I saw this morning was from I'm also on another group, which is they wanted me to stand as a director on this new board. It's an institute of customer experience, but just time-wise, I couldn't do it. So I put myself forward as a volunteer when they needed me. And that group, also, they're less prolific with their messages. But the CX Cop group had one message today where the chair of that was saying, that there are people that are currently looking for business and out of work. Can we help? Type of thing. So it's becoming, very much that type of support group as well.
And it should be, because if you're there and if you can help or if you need work. So, Eli, we need to wrap up, sadly, because I'm enjoying this a lot. How can people find you? What's the best way for them to find you?
I think probably if you go to customerline.com and there's an email address on there.
Okay.
It's probably the best way. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. It's always wonderful to chat with you.
Learn more at ebillion.com/podcast.